So, welcome to this, my first talk and only actual talk. We got a workshop later, so join us for that. So a little bit of, first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming. Good to see you all again. How are you? Are you loving the show, or is it the best show or the best show ever? How's it going? Ever, right? Okay, good. So, my name is Josh. It's kind of a mess up here. Sorry?
We're with you.
I'm with you too, man. I mean, I'm actually here, but, in theory, you know what I mean. Spiritually. Right, so, my name is Josh Long. If you have questions, if you leave this room more confused than when you entered, you have my email there, josh@joshlong.com or jlong@pivotal.io. And there's also Twitter there. Oh, yeah. Good stuff. There's also Twitter, right? How many of you are on Twitter? The Twitters. Twitter. It's 2015, my friends. 2015. It's not 2009 when I first started coming here. How many of you are on Twitter? My friends, it's the new IRC. You have to be on Twitter. It's awesome. Okay, wait. What about email? How many of you have email? Email. Anybody? No one? No one has email. What a bummer. Well, if you're on Twitter, that's a much better place to be than on email. It's shorter and the conversation is better. So find me on the Twitter, and if you must, on that old email system. I'm there. I am Josh Long. I'm a Spring developer advocate on the Spring team at Pivotal. Author of several different books, contributor to several different projects, including Spring Boot and Spring Cloud. The latest and greatest book is this new one that I'm writing with my friend Kenny, who I think some of you had the privilege of meeting earlier this week. I'm a Java champion. That's new. I wasn't a Java champion last year. I'm now a Java champion, an official, Oracle said so. So thank you, Oracle. And the Java community, of course. But, Oracle's the one that gives me the pretty jacket. Right, so anyway, good to be here. I work at a small company called Pivotal. How many of you have heard of Pivotal? Pivotal. No one, huh? No one. Okay, so we're a small startup. We have lots of great open source technology. How many of you have heard of Tomcat? No one. Nobody. Okay. What about Spring? Spring. Okay. No one. Good. Well, okay. Fine. That's fine. I know. It's okay. It's because I have to make sure we're all on the same page. People say, "Oh, well, where do you work? Do you do consulting for Spring?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, sorta, yeah." So, yes, sir. Well, we have some big, deep-pocketed parents. So we're a startup, just like all startups, right? All startups have venture capital money. So we have a small company called VMware. How many of you have heard of VMware? VMware. No one. Nobody. And then that company is owned by EMC. How many of you have heard of EMC? EMC. And now Dell. I'm getting a Dell. So that's now we have 3 layers of awesome. Right, so we're a small startup. We have Tomcat, Spring. What about RabbitMQ? RabbitMQ? Anybody? What about Redis? Redis, distributed data structure server. It's used by some small companies like Twitter, for example. And of course, we have Cloud Foundry, an open source platform as a service. How many of you have heard of Cloud Foundry? Cloud Foundry how many of you have heard of Heroku? Heroku? Or Google App Engine? Okay, so imagine that, but without the lock-in and open source, and it runs in all your data centers and on any infrastructure, and more features. And it's, written in a language you can use. So there's that, right? So we have lots of, Cloud Foundry is like a platform, right? It's a platform that is designed to help you move code into production, to deploy it, to manage it, to scale it. It's open source, and we have distributions. So there are some small companies that are using it as the basis of their distribution of Cloud Foundry. How many of you have heard of IBM? IBM. IBM. No, anybody? Anybody? No, that's okay. They're going to be big. They're going to be big one day. You watch the space. What about HP? HP. HP. Nobody? So yeah, lots of companies building on top of this ecosystem, building on top of the open source. Today, we at Pivotal, we care about helping customers and users move software into production. That serves everything that we do. We care about production a lot. Most people, they keep a little brochure on their desk, and the brochure is a dream. It's a vacation in beautiful Bulgaria or Hawaii or something like that. At Pivotal, we have brochures for production. We love production. We think about it all the time. It's the happiest place on earth for us. It's better than Disneyland. We love production, right? And so whatever we can do to help, whatever we can do to help developers and users get software into production, that's important to us, right? And so we've seen that modern applications today have very different dynamics than the applications we built 10 to 15 years ago because we have this automated platform, right? We have the cloud. And so the way we build software, the economics of how we build software, how we build architecture is very different from what it was 10 to 15 years ago. So part of that is how do you stand up? How do you stand up an application or an API very quickly? And how do you get it into production frequently, right? Especially in this new world, we have microservices. How many of you have been following this sort of wave of information around microservices? Microservices? The tiny ones? Okay. So the idea behind a microservice is that different organizations, different groups have seen that they're trying to get software into production. They want to be able to respond. They want to be able to react to market changes quickly and efficiently. And they see that they have these large code bases, and they spend a lot of time waiting for developers to stabilize their code, to synchronize, to commit everything, to test it, and then to deploy it. They also see that when they develop software, there's a large factory, a conveyor belt, if you will. It starts with product management and user experience people, and then it goes on to the developers, and then the testers, and then the QA, and then on to network admins and system administrators, and so on. And there's this flow of work, and it takes a long, long time for people to get the simple change that they have from one beginning all the way to the end. It takes a long time. And that's because they have these large code bases that are very slow to move. It's very hard to move the big ship, okay? And they also have this sort of flow from one team to another. And we've seen that even though you may have an agile development team, we as developers, we as software people are agile. The rest of the organization is very waterfall, right? You have work and then you throw it over the wall, and somebody will eventually take your perfect little, .jar or .war and deploy it into some environment. And this is what we call water scrum fall, right? Where you have development doing agile, but the rest of the organization is just doing waterfall. And it's a terrible, terrible way to go. So people say, okay, well, I want to make that faster. And so we move all of these different workstations into one group, right? One team that works in a circle. They don't have to do work for other teams. They focus on one thing. Operations, user experience, Q&A, and the development are all focused on one deliverable, one feature. But of course, you still have the problem of having too much code. You have too much code still, so you have too large a team. So people break apart these large code bases into smaller pieces. And these smaller pieces are more manageable. Now, I can have an idea or a story. I can write the code for it, write the test, go all the way through to the user, database changes into the network, and deploy it. And by the way, deployment is just cloud. So it's much faster now with a smaller code base. Well, of course, this is a microservice, right? That's the whole point of microservices, is to be able to facilitate that faster feedback loop. The faster you can make a change and get it into production, the faster you can respond and get changes made and understand what's happening. So doing that is different than what we used to do. And so part of what we're trying to do at Pivotal is to support building APIs and applications quickly and to get them into production. What we're going to talk about now, for the next however long they'll let me stay on stage, is something called Spring Boot. How many of you have heard of Spring Boot? Okay, so we're going to go over some of the new stuff in Spring Boot 1.3. It's going to be a basic 101 talk. We'll just look at the basics. I don't expect you to remember everything. Okay, that's not the goal. I expect you to remember individual, the fact that it's possible, and then you can look at the guides later on. There's spring.io/guides. So I'm going to sit here because I can't stand and type on that. It looks silly. And I can't sit and type on that because that's even sillier. But if I can relax here, I might fall asleep while we're talking, but at least I'll be comfortable. So here we go. I've never done this before. Oh yeah, I can do this. This is cool. So let's at least acknowledge the obvious, which is that building APIs can be very difficult, right? There's a lot of complexity, a lot of non-functional requirements that you have to appreciate when you move an application into production. These things are, we see organizations that have these large wiki pages with like 20 different steps to set up a new service or new API. Do you have such a thing? A wiki page or something where it's like you do all this before you can have a new API? It's such a kick in the brain, right? Because it makes it very, like, who wants to do it, Why? So people say, oh, well, instead of adding a new service, because it's so painful, I'll just add it to the existing one. And so you have what we, like application gravity, right? The gravity gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because it's easier than standing up a new service. What we're trying to do is to reduce all that extra noise. So let's look at Spring Boot. So there are several different ways to get started with Spring Boot. Hello, computer. There are several different ways to get started with Spring Boot. There we are. Nope. Okay, so there are several different ways to get started. My first go-to place, the best place on the internet, is start.spring.io. Bookmark it. If you are upset and you want something to relieve the stress, start.spring.io. If you're tired and want inspiration, start.spring.io. If your children are having trouble sleeping and they need something to cool them down and to give them better dreams, start.spring.io. Keep it under your pillow, okay? It's the second happiest place on the internet after production. After production, right? I go here whenever I want to start a new Java project. There is another way to start a project, of course. You can use the Spring Boot CLI. So here's the CLI. I'm going to say touch hi.groovy, and I'm going to open this up with my Atom editor here. Here we go. And I'm going to create a very simple REST controller, like so. I'll say @REST controller, greetings, REST controller. And I'll say def hi path variable, string name. And what I'm doing is I'm creating an endpoint that will respond to HTTP traffic with an anonymous object that has an attribute called greeting. And the greeting attribute will be a string that says hi, whatever the name is, and then exclamation mark, okay? I'm going to make it so that whenever somebody goes to /hi, / some sort of name, this endpoint will get invoked. And I can run that using the Spring Boot CLI, okay? That's here. You can get that using GVM or with Brew if you have a Mac, right? Or just install it in your path, it's fine. So then I can do spring run hi.groovy. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at the code and start up the application. And that'll be available here, localhost 8080 /hi Java2Days, right? And there we are. There's my very, very simple service, of course, right? But that's a little too simple. You may be thinking, that's not fair, Josh. I can't use that. I don't have the Spring CLI in production, right? Fair point. Fair point. So spring jar, hi.jar, hi.groovy. And then you can do java -jar, hi.jar. Now, that's much simpler to deploy. I can take that jar, put it in an email, and send it to my grandpa. And grandpa can deploy it. He can. He's got applets, right? Of course he can do this. If your operations team can't deploy that, you can fire them. It's okay. I checked the laws. If they can't do java -jar, you can fire them. It's allowed. It's fine. I checked. It's okay. No, I mean it, really. Fire them. They don't need to be there. Absolutely. Get rid of the idiots. So, and if they tell you that, oh no, we must deploy WebSphere, you can fire them as well, right? It's okay. It's not okay to be sick. You can just do Java. If this is too hard, then something's wrong, right? So Java-jar is great. We love Java-jar. It's a great way to go. But of course, I'm going to do Java. This is Java2Days, not Groovy2Days, although that would be cool. Don't you think that would be cool? Maybe. Okay, well, Scala2Days? Okay, fine. Okay, let's do this. So we're going to go to start.spring.io. I'm going to choose Spring Boot 1.30 RC1. This is the latest and greatest. And I'm going to add my usual assortment of things. You have options here, right? So usual Maven stuff, group and artifact and the name and the description, the package, and the packaging, okay? So if by some accident, some terrible accident of physics, if by some accident you are stuck 15 years ago in the past, you can choose WAR. That's for you. That's for you. But since we're here today, in 2015, we're going to choose jar. Now, this is part of our personal philosophies of make jar, not war. Now, you have options, okay? Options. Do what you want. We're here to support you, okay? Good. Now, let's choose some basic stuff that we want to have. So I'm going to add web, great. I'm going to add JPA support because I make bad life decisions, okay? JPA. I could add Mongo or, Cassandra or Neo4j, not yet. Oh, Kenny, what is that about, man? I'm going to add the actuator. I'll add the REST repositories. What else do I want to do? How much time do we have? What? Half an hour? We can do this. We'll be fine. REST repositories, actuator, JPA. Do I want anything else? Vaadin, why not? Let's just throw everything in. Vaadin. Got REST repositories, JPA, Vaadin. We can actually just view, we can go look at the checkboxes here, right? So if you want to see what there is, there's a lot of options, right? Above and beyond what I've selected already. Let's see, template, Timeleaf, good, we need that. JOQ, that would be cool. Elasticsearch, Cloud Connectors, OAuth, Spring Cloud support for, circuit breakers, service registration and discovery, configuration, declarative clients, REST clients, distributed tracing, messaging with Kafka or RabbitMQ or Redis or whatever, JMS is there, clustering support, state synchronization. We need a database. I'm going to use in-memory H2 database because why not? It's a demo. I'll use the remote shell. And that's it. That'll be enough. So we'll hit generate. I'm going to open. Whoops, what is this? Go away. Sorry. Generate again. Clean demo. Okay. Open that up. And now, a couple of things that are new. First of all, notice that we have a Maven wrapper script that's been added to the Spring Boot output. So if you're doing continuous delivery, if you want to be able to guarantee that the build of the application is the same from development to Q&A to production, you want to have reproducible builds, the wrapper always uses the same version. It's inspired, of course, directly from the Gradle wrapper. So if you chose Gradle, that would be there already. But now we have a Maven wrapper, which is great. Otherwise, it's just a Maven project. You could have chosen Maven or Gradle. How many of you are using Maven? Okay. How many of you are using Gradle? Oh, well, that's not good. So there's a delta, my friends. So you've got me a little worried. And we're friends, right? So you can tell me how many of you are using Ant. So I give away hugs. We've talked about this. Open source hugs. I'm here for you if you want to talk about Ant. Or Maven, for that matter. So I've got my little project here. Let me make the font just a wee bit bigger. So I'm going to choose, not bigger, more bigger. Okay. Here we are. Good. See? Much better. No, it's not. There. Can you see that in the back? Okay. So this is just a very, very simple Spring Boot application. There's a Maven build here. The Maven build has dependencies that are each checkbox, right? So each checkbox on start.spring.io is a dependency that you have here. And of course, you don't need these dependencies. You can do it however you want, but they are opinionated. So if I bring in just the web support, actually let me get rid of that as well. If I bring in just this, I have only the stuff I need for for unit testing, including Mockito and all that, as well as my embedded database. I'm going to bring in JPA to do JPA, and JPA is going to have everything I need to get started and be productive with JPA out of the box, including the latest and greatest Hibernate, JPA 2x, all the transaction support, JDBC support, everything you need right out of the box, right? So I'm going to just start with that, and we're going to do the same thing I always do because I don't care about the domain model. I really don't care. I'm going to show you the same stupid domain model, which is a class of type reservation, okay? And this reservation is just an object that is for, you call the restaurant and you say, I want to make a reservation for 2 people at 8 o'clock or whatever. This is a very simple object that will have just a field, and we'll save it in the database. So it's going to have a primary key like this, private long ID, private string reservation name. This is JPA, of course. I'll add some, bits here. There we are. Good. And it's Java, so there's that. More Java. More Java. This is for JPA, though, right? Why JPA? ToString. Good. Oh, come on, IntelliJ. And it's, of course, an at entity, so I'll make that so, like that. And I want this to be a separate type, so I'll move it out into a separate package, just for clean design, right? So get rid of all that. I want some way of managing the data in my database, so I'm going to use a repository. And a repository is an object from, it's a classic design pattern. The idea is that I want to have an object that handles the boring creation, reading, updating, and deleting business logic. So I'll say JPA repository that manages entities of type reservation with a primary key of type long. There are other repositories, right? These interfaces are different for each backing store. So MongoDB and Cassandra and Neo4j and Couchbase and React and whatever, right? You'll get the right kind of queries. These interfaces, you don't have to implement them. Spring Data will provide the implementation. And so you'll get methods for finding all, sorting, deleting, saving, etc. And you can even add custom finder methods. So I'm going to say collection of reservation, find by reservation name, okay? And all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be saying whenever somebody calls this bean and they call this method, it will create a query that is more or less the same as select all from reservations where reservation underscore name equals rn, okay? This is by convention. Of course, you can override this. You can say at query, blah, 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 okay? But we want to leave it like that. Now, I'm going to create a bean that will use that reservation repository to create data and put it in the database. So we have something to play with. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. I could create a regular bean like this. I could say my CLR implements command line runner. And then I'm going to implement this command line runner interface. And the interface is a Spring Boot interface. It's a callback. Whenever Spring sees any object that has this interface, it will call the run method and it'll pass in the arguments here. So it's good for batch or ETL or anything that isn't web specific. So I'm going to do that. I want to just inject the repository and do some basic data initialization. But if you think about it, all I'm doing is I'm creating an object with a name and everything. Just for the side effect, I want to call this method. I want to tell the language and the platform and the technology to call this method here. And as you know, modern languages like C, COBOL, C++, Objective-C, PHP, JavaScript, Forth, OCaml, C#, F#, Ruby, Python, Perl, PHP, Basic, C, F#, Fortran. I mean, only the modern languages from the last 50 years or so, they have a very, very powerful feature that lets them pass around functions and treat them as native currency, right? And so it makes me very happy now that with Java 8, we also sort of have this feature, sort of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bean. I'm going to create a bean, and I'm going to return an instance of type command line runner. And I'm just going to use a lambda. I'll say return args like that, which is much better than all of this object stuff, right? I don't need the side. I just want the side effect. I don't want the actual object. I have no state after all. And I'm going to tell Spring to inject a repository there. So when this application starts up, it's going to call this method and we'll say Andrew, because that guy's the best. Kenny, of course, also the best. Emma, of course. Who else? Who else wants this? Can I have a name? Somebody? What's your name? Sylvia. Like that? Okay. I'm out. I've got no more names. Oh, wait. Oh, it's my buddy, Dimitri. There we are. So for each one of those, we'll say for each name, we'll say save new reservation name. Save that in the database. And then I'm going to ask the repository to give me every record back. And I'm going to pass the print line method. I'll use a method reference in Java 8. And I'll say that for each record that comes back to print out the object that it refines. And then, of course, I'll find the specific record for my buddy there. And print out that single record as well. Whoops, hello. And I'm going to run this. Now, I haven't configured a data source, right? If I had a data source like this, if I said data source, Oracle, whatever, I could return that object. I could return the bean definition, and that would be used, or I could specify it somewhere. But I haven't done that. And because I have H2 on the class path, Spring Boot automatically creates an embedded data source for us. So I don't have to create anything. That's why this worked. So here's the record, right? Here's the one predicate query, and then here's everything in the database. So that worked. Of course that worked. It's a demo. I knew that was going to work. You knew that was going to work. We don't really need to think about that. Instead, let's talk about this. And now, every year, people ask me, isn't that amazing? I think it's amazing. Now, this is the ASCII artwork inside of Spring Boot. We have on the Spring team PhDs, doctors. Not kidding. Doctors. They're doctor. And in their previous lives, they worked on nuclear physics. Star stuff, right? They cared about the heavens above us and the creation of the universe. That was their daily bread and butter. And then they decided to really change the world, so they joined Spring, right? And it makes me very happy because at one point, somebody gave them a GitHub issue saying, we need ASCII artwork, damn it. And look at this. It's gorgeous. So beautiful. Now, you can change that. Of course you can change it, right? If you put a little file here, you say, source main resources, new file, banner.txt, and then you go to your favorite ASCII generation website, right? Here we are. So we say Java2Days, and we're going to say epic, I don't know, goofy, no. Do it, no. Epic. It's so close. Okay, fine. We need a little bit longer, huh? 90. Yes. So that's our much better logo, I think. So we'll keep that for now. And we'll place that in here, and then we'll restart. And of course, you can use that. You can use whatever you want, right? Don't you agree that's pretty good? Powerful feature. If you need that, right? It is. I see what you're doing. So that's good. That's powerful. But of course, I think the Spring one is just a little bit better. Doctors, after all. So we'll let the doctors have their way. And I'm just saying that that's there. So now, oh, hey. Is it gone? Hello, computer. Now, at this point, I also want to take issue with IntelliJ. So I like IntelliJ, I like Eclipse, I like NetBeans, but I think there's a big bug in IntelliJ that we should all sign a petition and maybe get them to change it, okay? They added a new feature in IntelliJ 14 that is just stupid. What the hell? Why is this here? Why would you have this dumb feature? We should get rid of it. Let's sign a petition to change that org thing, okay? Whatever. Anyway, moving on. So now, I've got something in the database. I've got some data. It's 2015, of course, so I'm going to stand up a REST API like so. I'll say reservation REST controller. And I'll say @AutoWired private reservation repository like that. And I'll say @request, @request. I need to bring in the Spring Boot web support, actually. Forgot about that. So bring in Spring Boot Starter Web. That brings in everything I need to be productive with Spring MVC and to build REST APIs and all that. So I'll go back here, and I'll say @REST controller. Okay, and I'm going to create an endpoint that responds to traffic, just like I did before. So it'll be reservations, collection of reservation, return this .reservation repository .find all. Okay, and I'll restart that, and that's going to see that I've got the Spring Boot Starter Web on the class path, and that I've got the basic bits that I need to support building web applications. And so now I can go here. I can go local host 8080/reservations. And there's my basic REST API, of course, right? So that's there, that's fine. But that's actually a lot of work for kind of something very simple. So instead, I'm going to go back and remove all that extra dumb code. And we'll add support for REST APIs based on the repository using Spring Boot Starter Data REST. I'll go back to my application here. I'm going to annotate my repository. I'll say repository REST resource. And I'm going to annotate the finder methods as well. I'll say path equals by name. And I want to tell the repository to expose the query parameter as RN, not RB. And then I'll restart. And what that'll do is that'll give me a REST API that handles creation, reading, updating, and deleting, just like the repository does, automatically. It's going to map HTTP verbs to the state transitions, you know? So now if I revisit this, you can see I've got hypermedia, right? Links that tell me information about the resources. These links here tell me what I can do with a given resource. If I'm a browser client, I can go to the endpoint, look at the links, and say, oh, here's my menu of options. I can go left, I can go right, right? These are what I can do with the current resource. Even better, if I want to do searching, I can go up here and say page equals 1 and size equals 1, and I get Kenny, right? There's my one record. And you can see down here, if I do the searching, I've got links down here that say, oh, well, if you want to see the first page, go to this one. If you want to see the previous page, self, next, last, etc. It even has the finder methods, the search endpoint, right? So reservation search. And you can see that my search by name thing is here as well. So I can go by name, RN equals Dimitri. And there's my search results, all powered by that repository. Much faster, of course. This is a simple REST API, and this is key to standing up a service quickly and efficiently. But of course, this wouldn't be a demo without your basic web application stuff. So we're going to try a few different ways of creating a web endpoint. One is just to use regular old MVC. How many of you have used or know somebody who's used or maybe have heard of Spring MVC? How many of you? Nobody? No one? 0 people? Nobody. No Spring MVC at all? 0. Bummer. Well, this is Spring MVC. It's fairly new. It's been around since 2002. And the idea is that you just map HTTP requests to response. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create a demo here, okay? This is a demo. I don't want you to do everything I'm doing here exactly. I'm going to use a crazy URL that no one would ever use in a real system. So don't, do as I say, not as I do, okay? Something crazy, something that just as a demo, like reservations.php. Now, there we go. So there's my endpoint. And I'm going to inject the model, and a model is a key value store. It's a map. So I'll say model.add attribute reservations, and I'm going to put the reservation data in there. I'm going to inject my reservation repository. And I'll say this.reservation repository.find all. Paste that in there, and I'll say return reservations, and then I'll restart. Okay, so that's one option, but I need a template. I need a template to render, and so it has to take this string and find the template based on convention. So by convention, it's going to look for source main resources, templates, plus X, whatever that is, plus .html. I'm going to use Timeleaf. How many of you have heard of Timeleaf? Timeleaf? Oh. So Timeleaf is how to make, if you want to make more friends at the office, use Timeleaf. So you can use Groovy server pages or Velocity or FreeMarker or Mustache or whatever. I like Timeleaf because it's a natural templating technology. So github.com/JoshLong/Bootiful microservices. Okay. Oh, could you hear that? Oh, that was so good. Come on, internet. We need you. Could somebody stop checking their email for a minute? Go Webs. Well, while that's coming up, I'll move on to something else and we'll come back to it, since I do need the internet. We're going to build a Vaadin endpoint as well. How many of you have heard of Vaadin? V-A-A-D-I-N. So how many of you have heard of GWT? Google Web Toolkit. It's a way of compiling from Java to JavaScript. If you don't want to worry about JavaScript, I understand that. JavaScript is like a nightmare language, right? So it's like being inside of a crazy person's head. So I understand why you may not want to, but you should, because it's very powerful. But if you don't want to, if you just want to get something up and running very quickly, you can use Vaadin to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a UI. I'll say class reservation UI extends UI. And I'm going to bring back my Vaadin support here, right? So here we are. Goodbye to this. And Alt-Enter. Hello, computer. Spring UI. Thank you. Thank you. And it'll be Spring UI. And I'm going to implement the init method. And I'll say table t equals new table. T.set Vaadin UI table. Set container data source. And I'm going to do the same as before. I'm going to inject the reservation repository and return all the data. This.reservation repository.find all. And then I'll say that the content of the UI that I'm building is the table component, and that the table component should be full size. Oh yeah, I forgot to, here we go. New bean item container of reservation.class with all that data. There you go. So that's what I'm doing. And hopefully this is loaded. Yes. Okay. Don't check your email. Ooh. Ooh. I'm scared. Come on, computer. Oh, this is so horrible. If it would just go a little faster. Okay. Well, anyway, this is one approach. The other approach, of course, is just to have a static page that gets loaded by the client without any server-side processing. So I'm going to create a simple hi.html, and I'm going to put it in the static directory. And this is good for JavaScript and CSS and things like that. Of course, if you have a Angular or React application or whatever, you put that here as well. So hi, Java2Days, right? There's this. Ooh. Don't touch the internet. Yes. We made it. Okay. So there's my little template. I'm going to put that in the templates file here as well. New reservations.html. Paste. So this is a way of making friends. It's regular HTML, so you can open it up in your Dreamweaver or whatever your designer people are using, and they won't leave bags of poop on your desk, right? Have you ever had that thing where you take your designs and it's JSP and it's got tags inside of tags and it doesn't render, and so then you give it to the graphics designer people and then they look at you like really, really upset, like they're about to poo or something, you know? Like, that's what happens when you use JSP. Friends don't let friends use JSP. Okay? We're here for each other. It's a team goal. Let's do this together. Be the change you want to see. Okay, so now I've got 3 different kinds of UIs. I think that's enough. Let's go ahead and just start this thing up. Here we go. Oh, so many. Well, let's see. Localhost 8080 /reservations.php. There's my simple page. That's working. It's a list of all the data. That's great. I'm going to go to /UI, and there's my simple unthemed table, which has sorting and all that stuff. And this is all JavaScript. There's no like server-side generated HTML here, right? This is all just JavaScript being sent from the server. And then, of course, there's hi.html right here, which is my simple unprocessed HTML page. So you can see, no matter what your approach, if you're just doing pure client-side JavaScript or server-side UI widgets and whatever, or just regular Spring MVC kind of stuff, all that's very simple to pull together. There's even integrations for other technologies out there. My friend Andrew and I got a prototype for Wicket working last year, about a year ago, which is, I remember that being kind of workable. So that's all well and good, but this is an application, and remember what we talked about. We're not trying to build applications quickly. We're trying to build applications that we can ship into production, right? Shipping is wonderful. Shipping is everything. If you can do something today, ship it, right? So we want to ship software, and of course, what is the thing that gates our ability to move software into production? The thing that stops our ability to do that? Often it's boring stuff. It's the stuff that is the last mile, you know? How many of you have ever read Michael Nygaard's amazing book, Release It? The idea is that, oh, well, there's one guy. The idea is that code complete does not equal production ready, right? So there's a lot of things you have to do before you can move software to production. So I'm going to go back to my build here, and I'm going to bring in just 2 more little dependencies here. And I'm going to restart after having formatted that. There we are. Drink some water. Here we go. So if I go back to my app as before, localhost :8080 /reservations, you can see I've got the same REST API as before. I go to reservations.php. There's my page. I'm making requests. I'm using Command R to make as many requests as I can. I'm letting go, and it's still making requests because I held the button down so much, right? So there we go. So now, if I go to /metrics, I can get information about the requests that I just made. Metrics tells me information about the state of my system, right? The state of my application. I can use these numbers to change how my system is behaving. I can measure it. You can only fix what you can measure. So all of this information is useful. It says, for example, that I made 56 requests to reservations.php, got a status code of 200, right? It says that I made 2 requests to the fave icon. 6 requests to the fave icon with a status code of 200. If I want to see a deep dive, I can go to trace, and it shows me the timestamp, the verbs, the endpoints, and the headers for all of the requests into the system, right? Well, the last 100 anyway, by default. If I go to mappings, I can see all of the endpoints that are exposed to production traffic, the content type, and whatever other qualifiers we can use to predicate them and qualify them. And all of these endpoints are very good for visibility, for auditing. If you want to see what is exposed for security, you can have this endpoint that's very useful. What else? Mappings. Oh, of course, one of my favorite is health. How many of you have written a custom health check for your services at some point or another, right? We all do it. It's not exciting. It's boring. Nobody in your team, your boss, is never going to come to you and say, good job on writing the health check. Promotion, right? Here's more money. It's never going to happen. Never. Because it's boring, stupid code, but you've got to do it. All your systems are going to need it. So we have a default health check that comes out of the box for disk space and for the database and so on. But of course, all of this stuff is what we provide out of the box for REST. I want to change some of this, first of all. And second of all, I want to be able to access this stuff from different ways, right? This is just REST. We also support talking to systems like Graphite. How many of you have heard of Graphite? For graphing information across a timeline? Yep, there you go. Graphite, OpenTSDB, like this one, OpenTSDB from Twitter. Anybody? Another time series database. StatsD. Anybody hear of that one? So StatsD is a daemon that receives metrics. But it was written in Node.js, so it doesn't scale, so nobody uses it, right? It's the protocol that people use. The protocol is supported by lots of different systems, including Datadog, including Graphite, including whatever, right? So you can take that protocol and send metrics, keys and values, to different systems to visualize these metrics over time. So we have metrics writers that you can configure. We also support just the basics. Like we have this REST support, for example. I also added, you'll recall, the Spring Boot Starter remote shell. And what that does is it configures a remote shell that uses SSH by default. So I say SSH minus P 2000 user at 127.0.0.1, and I paste in my password that I found on the console. If I'd used Spring Security, any identity provider that Spring Security talks to, like OpenID or LDAP or Active Directory or whatever, I can speak to that instead of having a password that's printed on the console. When I log in, good quality ASCII artwork, calming ASCII artwork. If you're in a production crisis, this is what you want, okay? Now I can ask questions. I can say, show me some help, show me the metrics, and this is live. It's updated on, without me changing anything, right? I have the endpoints. I can say endpoint list, endpoint invoke. Here's the health endpoint, for example. Here's my custom health, here's my health endpoint. My favorite is dashboard, right? So dashboard shows you this. There you go, right? It's actually the Java top on the top. It's all the running threads, as well as the memory buffers for the application itself. But I want to change all of these things. I mean, it's nice to be able to have this stuff, but it's very convenient if you can override the defaults. So Spring Boot makes that dead simple. I'm going to add a health indicator. I'll say bean health indicator, return new health indicator. And what this is going to do is it's going to contribute my own custom business-specific health indicator to the endpoint that I have at /health. So I've already got my data source, my disk space. I want to contribute my own one that says health.status. And of course, you could say health.outofservice or up or down or whatever. But I'll say health.status. I love Java2Days, right? .build. And I have other ones that are contributed by default by Spring Boot, right? So for Cassandra, for disk space, for Elasticsearch, for JMS, Java Mail, RabbitMQ, Solr, Redis, etc. All that is provided by default if it's applicable. So I've got this. I also want to change, maybe I want to change the where these endpoints in REST are available from, right? So I'm going to say management.contextPath equals /admin. And that's going to make it so that /beans and /health and all that stuff will be only available under /admin. So /admin /health. So now if I go here, localhost admin /health, you'll see my custom health indicators there, and I've managed to change the path of the health indicator. So it's very easy to override and contribute defaults by changing properties and by contributing objects. The way all of this works is that there's a text file, a magic text file, that you can use in your organization in the jars on the class path. So Spring Boot auto configure, where is that one here? I think it's this one, we hope. There you go, yeah. So this is spring.factories in the meta inf directory. And it says org spring framework boot auto configure enable auto configuration equals, and then a long list of Java configuration classes. So of course I've got RabbitMQ and AOP and Cassandra and MongoDB and Jackson and Flyway and JOOQ and Groovy and Liquidbase and Twitter and whatever. All this stuff is here. These are Java configuration classes, just like we have been doing this entire time. If I open up the Rabbit auto configuration Java class, it's just Java objects, regular Java configuration with different bean definitions, like our health indicator, right? These beans are only created on certain conditions. So here it says, only create this bean if this type is on the class path. Only create this Java class full of beans. So if the Rabbit template is on the class path, then create these beans inside the Java config class. Otherwise, don't bother. Similarly, Rabbit template will only be created if the user, that's you or me, hasn't already contributed a Rabbit template to the application. And so this means that Spring can create lots of objects and do useful things, but only if they are required. That's why when you saw earlier, I added libraries to the class path, and magic, I have new features. Like the actuator endpoints only appeared when I added Spring Boot Starter Actuator. So you can use that same facility, the auto config, and all these other all this other support, to build services and applications consistently for your organization, instead of having that 20-page wiki page, 20-page wiki document explaining how to stand up a new service. You just put out a jar saying, my Java2Days starter, put Spring.Factories in your meta inf directory, and put the default Java config for your security, for your auditing, for whatever your organization needs across all of the services. And then you can start up a new service very quickly. That's been a very quick, albeit very slow, run through. Sorry for taking so much longer than allocated. I am happy to take questions off stage. Later on, we're doing a hands-on lab on cloud native Java. My friend Ken and I, and anybody else who wants to join, we'll all be there. It's in. I have no idea. We have no idea. It's in this building at some point today. Be there, or don't. I mean, it's okay. But I hope to see you there. Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon. Oh, I forgot to. Oh my goodness. Okay, I forgot the most important thing, the selfie. Now, okay. When we're doing this, when I say 1, 2, and then we all say Rakia, okay? So, okay, here we go. 1, 2, wait. 1, 2, Rakia. And now you. 1, 2. Thank you. I love Rakia.